the fact that these kinds of authoritarian regimes or authoritarian thinkers, they need to perform cruelty regularly.
Yes, but now you're making them sound like geniuses, albeit of a diabolical flavour.
Now, why do authoritarian regimes need to show cruelty? Well, LBC's James O'Brien on Monday was asking about the meeting between Donald Trump, Zelensky and mascara man JD Vance. James was basically asking, what did they actually get out of this obviously staged press conference and public mugging? Well, this LBC caller came up with an interesting slant.
Frank's in Southwark. Frank, what would you like to say?
Well, thank you for having me in the programme.
You're very welcome.
What I wanted to say is I think there's something that I think has been missing in the discussion and that people are underestimating, and that is the fact that these kinds of authoritarian regimes or authoritarian thinkers, they need to perform cruelty regularly.
Yes.
And it's like you see in gangs that if you want to join the gang, you have to commit some random act of cruelty.
An initiation. Was that Vance's initiation, do you think, on Friday?
No, I don't think this was Vance's initiation. This was Vance and Trump performing cruelty on Zelensky.
Yeah.
And sending this as a message, not just to the president of Panama and to Trudeau and to European leaders, but also to every American senator, every American governor, and every American citizen, saying, we can do this.
We can do whatever we want.
And so you better fall in line. And authoritarian regimes need to do this because they cannot put a soldier in everybody's kitchen.
Mm.
They need people to submit, to surrender. And one way in which you can try to do that is what you see here. You are cruel to people because it wasn't that they broke protocol towards Zelensky. They were actively cruel towards him.
Yes.
And that is the purpose. So when they congratulate each other afterwards, it's because they are happy about the demonstration that they've given. And obviously, this is a kind of process that requires constant escalation. So they don't. So asking about who approves of it is the wrong question. It's a question about who is cowed by it, really, and they're not going to tell you that they're cowed by it because that would be an act of dissent. Oh yes, and if you want to show that you are on their side, you will be required to display cruelty as well.
Which came from the question from the journalist about Volodymyr Zelensky's clothes.
Of course, the journalist knew exactly why Zelensky is wearing those clothes. I was surprised that the media were always sort of picking that question, without explaining that it's actually totally well known why he wears these clothes. He associates with his soldiers on the battlefield. In the
same way that Winston Churchill wore a boiler suit when he visited the White House in 1942 to show solidarity with people who were being bombed back in London.
Yes, but Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend got an opportunity to show that he can ask a cruel question.
Yes, you're right.
And that's what these kinds of regimes force people to do. They want you to say, spill the beans on your neighbour. They want your colleague at work to disclose what that colleague says in his private or her private time about...
But now you're making them sound like geniuses, albeit of a diabolical flavour.
I don't think it is geniuses. I think, unfortunately, what we have here is people who simply have a talent to do this.
It's almost more atavistic than a talent, because that makes it sound like a learned behaviour. We talked a lot about trauma on Friday, and I'll share a thread shortly and tell people shortly about a brilliant therapist who's done a kind of body language analysis of what happened in the Oval Office on Friday. But cruelty comes from weakness. So they weren't born like this, but they need to be like this in order to get through the day, and everything else is collateral damage.
And what happens is that if the circumstances are right, people with this particular trait, they come to the surface.
Yes, if the circumstances are right. So in terms of if they had a conversation about what they had achieved or what they had won, they would just simply be high-fiving each other for all the perceived punches that they landed upon Volodymyr Zelensky.
Exactly. And
we showed him.
And they will have been delighted that it was great television, because that meant that every American household saw it. And even the people who might not have agreed with it, but they will, somewhere in their mind, there will be a voice saying, if they can do this to the president of another country,
and they could do it to not just the president of another, the most courageous, he gives himself a free pass. The most courageous wartime leader of the 21st century can be bullied by these clowns. Therefore, nobody's safe. And don't you forget it.
And at the same time, they've got somebody who's got their hands on their social security monies, etc., and can fire people at will. And that's the same kind of performative cruelty. They didn't look at who they're going to fire. They just want to perform this act to show people either be on our side or be at risk.
And other callers have then led us back to the why they want to achieve this, and the three stories that we've sort of sewn together this morning certainly speak towards something pretty hideous. You know, taking the team charged with fighting cyber threats from Russia, to standing them down, introducing legislation very, very much to the favour of sanctioned Russian oligarchs as part of the first few days in power for the new Attorney General, and now the suspension of laws designed to tackle money laundering. All of them were put in place by this administration. So why do they need to achieve the things that Frank describes? Answer to do terrible things to the country that will be too frightened to resist? I don't know. These are just theories moving into spaces freed up. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, has shared her thoughts on what Nigel Farage was doing this morning. I'll share those with you. If they're not in Thomas's news bulletin, which they might be, I'll share them with you after this.
Now, it's a slant I hadn't really considered before, but Frank does make some quite strong points, doesn't he? Especially about the authoritarian regimes, and especially what Trump did at the end, you know, when he said that this will make great viewing. That spoke volumes to me, because that was what, for me, was meant to show. It was just meant for his base for me. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below. And also, I know this is something different to what I normally do, but I just thought it was an excellent call and something I just hadn't considered before. But let me know what you guys think. Is Frank right? Is this just two bullies basically partaking in performative cruelty and just to send out a message? Or do you think there's another reason for this happening? Well, if you do, let me know down below, and I shall just bid you farewell and take care, my friends.